is here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
America, Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. I'm posting something now that I want to read to you. I literally wrote it about 15 minutes ago, but I've been thinking about this. My public advice to President Trump's legal team, Mr. Producer, it's team, T-E-A-M, not time. The Biden administration has created a legal morass never seen or experienced in American history, as applies to a presidential election. The Attorney General appointed by the Democrat president is authorizing indictment after indictment of his president's possible, if not likely, political opponent in the middle of a presidential election cycle. He's doing so through his appointment of a special counsel, whose appointment was a misapplication of the special counsel regulation, and whose charges must be approved by the Attorney General himself. And parenthetically, by the way, as an important side issue, Jack Smith is not a presidential appointee. He never even stood for confirmation by the Senate to hold the position, check for typos, Rich, to hold the position he holds, and to exercise the authority he is exercising against a party opponent. It should be noted at the same time the Attorney General refuses to appoint an outside special counsel to investigate his client, Joe Biden, despite the fact the Department of Justice regulation was originally instituted for these exact circumstances. Of course, this underscores the purpose and motive of what is taking place before us today. The Attorney General is approving the timing of dozens of charges against the former Republican president, who is actively seeking his party's nomination to challenge the Democrat president for whom he directly reports, which are intended to cripple the ability of Donald Trump to effectively run for president, regardless of what polls show today. Regardless of what the commentariats say, and despite President Trump's strength within the Republican Party, the outcome of the election is unknown. Therefore, the polls are irrelevant in this regard. Moreover, as further evidence that these indictments are being used as political weapons are the timing of the charges. Specifically, all of these charges by the separate grand juries, all controlled by the special counsel, should have been filed after the election, as there was no possibility the statute of limitations would run on any of them. Furthermore, the special counsel repeatedly insists that the charges must be quickly adjudicated, meaning before the people vote, for the purpose of having maximum influence on the election. In addition, the charges have resulted in the significant depletion of Trump's campaign funds to pay for millions in legal fees. Trump has to take significant time from campaigning to address the dozens of charges dropped on him by the Biden administration. That is, he has to expend an enormous amount of time working with his lawyers in order to defend himself from charges that collectively would result in his imprisonment until his death. The fact is that this kind of legal warfare against a presidential and possible, if not likely, opponent to the present president is not only unprecedented in the history of our republic, it will destroy our electoral system for all time. It is not something that should be left to various district courts or local courts to sort out in the course of regular judicial proceedings. In fact, that is part of the intended strategy by the prosecutors who are engaged in this assault on our electoral system. They must not be rewarded for their behavior. They must not be rewarded for their treachery and exploitation of the legal system and the courts to achieve their political ends. Even while getting to the merits of these multitude of charges, which are easily unraveled from my perspective, the process is what is being used to interfere with the election. And the near silence by those who are orchestrating this shocking legal warfare, when the American people are left in the dark, is untenable. Therefore, I want to publicly encourage the Trump legal team to seek an emergency hearing before the United States Supreme Court, not to resolve legal disputes, but to at least temporarily halt the abomination of this legal warfare that is unfolding in front of us, where Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans are unashamedly celebrating the use of the courts by the Biden administration and Democrat district attorneys to further their political wishes, as the rest of the nation watches in shock. This unprecedented legal warfare requires an unprecedented response by the only constitutional body left that can do something about it: the United States Supreme Court. This is my view, because what is taking place today in various courthouses and so forth and so on is part of the strategy. The legal system is slow. It is the process. It is the process that's the killer here. And they know it. And they're playing the process by unloading all these indictments, by taking Trump off the campaign field, by depleting his resources, by influencing people who are not like you and me, people who still vote, 2/3 of the nation that are not part of the Republican base. That's who this is aimed at. The polls don't matter. The polls and the pollsters are fickle. We should know that by now. And it's not about polls. And on top of all this, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden has been able to sit on a beach and laugh while his Department of Injustice does all the dirty work, while the Democrat DAs do all the dirty work, and the media do all the dirty work. You see, folks, I look at this holistically. That's what I do. And I get into the weeds, too, with the best of them. But you got to take a step back from time to time and say, what the hell's going on here? None of this is by coincidence. All of it is purposeful. If you have any shot at stopping it, you have to get past the trial courts, past the appellate courts, and within the time frame of this campaign, hope that the U.S. Supreme Court sees, at least 4 of them do, in order to take up a cert petition, what the rest of us see. This would not be the Supreme Court interfering in a political process. This would be the Supreme Court defending the Constitution. Never before has a political party and opponents of a candidate, never before have they sunk so low as to take the law and twist it into a pretzel like this. To use the law to use grand juries, to use charging documents, to use subpoenas, search warrants, and activist judges appointed by the same party to undertake such treachery. And if, upon an emergency request of the Supreme Court turns its back, then there's no stopping this. Today, tomorrow, next election, for the rest of this republic's life, we're just getting shorter by the day. I look at people like Bill Barr, Chris Christie, Larry Hogan, and others. Trump brought this on himself, don't you know? No, he didn't. No, he didn't at all. The people who are doing it brought it on. I want to remind you about who Joe Biden is, and that he will sink to any level he must. When he thought it would help him back home to be a racist segregationist, he was a racist segregationist who literally opposed the integration of inner-city public schools. He was the George Wallace, the Orville Faubus of Delaware. He's a chameleon. He will do anything. He tried to destroy the reputation of one of the greatest legal minds this nation has ever seen, Bob Bork. What was Bob Bork's crime? He was a true constitutionalist. He was nominated to the United States Supreme Court by Ronald Reagan, so they destroyed him. Clarence Thomas, a black man, would not go down on bended knee and beg his white accusers on the Senate Judiciary Committee for their votes. Defended himself against a typical stereotype used against black men by the Klansmen and others, accusing him of sexual harassment, if you will. Certainly there are justices on the Supreme Court who understand what I'm talking about, including the very disappointing Kavanaugh, including John Roberts, if he would actually wake up to reality and see what is taking place in this country. There's only one body left that, if asked, can and should step in and stop this abomination. It is destroying our country. We were reminded last night by an Israeli, Carolyn Glick, born in America, who said, one of the great legal minds in Israel who she spoke to said, in the United States, the Dred Scott decision, which was decided in 1857, the impact of that decision took a few years to really settle in, and it served as the foundation for the Civil War. Unfortunately, I believe we've reached this point. I don't say it to be provocative. I say it out of the gravest of concerns. I say it in order that we might avoid the potential of what could happen. A combustible situation. Because this can't go on forever. And when I hear media types say, we're kind of getting used to this, aren't we, Martha? Getting used to this. It's Thursday. It must be more indictments. 3 times now, and a 4th coming in Atlanta. This isn't a joke. This isn't a sporting event. This is serious to the survivability of this republic. I'm not getting used to any of it. I'm getting sick to my stomach every time it happens. You and I know in our heart of hearts that this is utterly and completely unjust. Alvin Bragg brought phony charges against Donald Trump. The case that was brought the other day, January 6th, utterly phony. A phony case. The documents case, or even the best of these so-called legal analysts, think it's a much tougher case. In truth, if the judge is really honest and has integrity, when, and I hope soon, the right motions are filed, she will throw that case out of her courtroom as fast as she possibly can. This is one political party trying to destroy another. This is one political party trying to monopolize elections, federal law enforcement, and the entire justice system. And if they get away with it, it's over. It's over. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know what helps me sleep well at night? Physical gold. I'm concerned about what the Biden administration is doing, and I've decided to learn more about gold IRAs to help me diversify. Did you know you can buy gold for your IRA or 401k? Gold can't be tracked like digital currency. No one has to know what you're buying, and there's no way to print more. My best resource for gold IRAs is Augusta Precious Metals. Their track record is no less than phenomenal. Learn why thousands of Americans are getting gold IRAs as part of their retirement portfolios, and you need to contact Augusta Precious Metals and get their free guide. I'm serious. Text Levin to 68592. Again, text LEVIN to 68592. Levin to 68592, or go to AugustaPreciousMetals.com. That's AugustaPreciousMetals.com. Text date and message rates may apply. Performance varies. Consult your financial professionals before making investment decisions and get risk disclosures at AugustaPreciousMetals.com. I only have about a minute or so left in this segment, and I want to expand on these points for you after the bottom of the hour, so I hope you'll stick with me. I want to make abundantly clear that we're not talking about immunization here. As bogus as so many of these charges, all these charges, in my view, are. We're not talking about that, because I don't think the Supreme Court would do that. What we're talking about here is the integrity of an electoral system and the violation of that integrity that affects the entire republic. Regardless of the fools you see on TV, regardless of Bill Barr, who is a complete jackass, regardless of Mike Pence, who has finally found his voice in attacking Donald Trump, these people are pimples on the ass of an elephant. They're irrelevant. Utterly irrelevant. I'm talking about what's in the best interest of this nation. I'll be right back. You know what helps me sleep well at night? Physical gold. I'm concerned about what the Biden administration is doing, and I've decided to learn more about gold IRAs to help me diversify. Did you know you can buy gold for your IRA or 401k? Gold can't be tracked like digital currency. No one has to know what you're buying, and there's no way to print more. My best resource for gold IRAs is Augusta Precious Metals. Their track record is no less than phenomenal. Learn why thousands of Americans are getting gold IRAs as part of their retirement portfolios, and you need to contact Augusta Precious Metals and get their free guide. I'm serious. Text Levin to 68592. Again, text LEVIN to 68592. Levin to 68592, or go to AugustaPreciousMetals.com. That's AugustaPreciousMetals.com. Text date and message rates may apply. Performance varies. Consult your financial professionals before making investment decisions and get risk disclosures at AugustaPreciousMetals.com.
Mark Levin, radio's principal patriot. Call in now at 877-381-3811.
Just a few more comments. I suppose one way you could try to get the case quickly in front of the Supreme Court, or one of them, is to file a motion immediately, among the type that we've talked about before, ask the lower court to make a expedited decision, take it to the appellate court, see if they can do an expedited decision, get it to the Supreme Court. I just think that's all going to take too long, and I think that the Department of Justice has brain trusted this thing and have decided to exploit the slowness of the legal process, even while claiming they want, as quickly as possible, a verdict to make it real, to really box in Donald Trump as much as possible. I want you to keep several things in mind here. The burdens imposed on a candidate for president by the initiation of criminal proceedings is enormous. It's enormous. The severity of the burden imposed on a presidential candidate who's been charged, the stigma arising from the initiation of criminal prosecution, also from the need to respond to those charges through the judicial process, seriously interferes with this election. And to do so over and over and over again just demonstrates to you what's taking place here. In multiple courts, scores and scores of charges. The constitutional provisions, that is, the provisions in the Constitution governing criminal prosecutions, make clear what? The framers believe that an individual's mental and physical involvement and assistance in the preparation of his defense, both before and during any criminal trial, would be intense. No less so for a presidential candidate than for any other defendant. But that's the point. He's a presidential candidate. And this legal warfare that's been unleashed against Donald Trump is intended to limit his ability to even focus on his reelection, to raise funds that will actually go toward his reelection rather than his legal defense, and to turn off all those non-MAGA, non-base supporters who say, I'm tired of this, I want to move on. That's the strategy. That's the plan. That's how it's playing out. Now, they keep talking up this district judge in Washington, D.C. She's a hack. Former defense counsel, but it's funny how she acts, isn't it? She acts like the most wild-eyed prosecutor imaginable when anything related to Trump takes effect, and Trump happened to get her as the judge, if you can imagine. Gee, what a coincidence. What a coincidence. This is bigger than one district court judge. There's about 1,000 district court judges. This is much bigger than her. It's bigger than all the other district court judges who only get a piece of the action. It's bigger than an individual circuit court. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals was expanded for the purpose of putting more Obama appointees on there. That's what they did, Obama and Harry Reid. It's a very unfavorable appellate court to Trump as a result. That's the plan. Not just for Trump, but for any conservative or Republican. So as you plod through this process, the problem is these trial courts at the federal level, they want to have a full trial. Then they want to have a sentencing. This guy Smith says, yeah, and we want it all done before you even vote. So it's quite obvious by the timing of these indictments, all of which can wait. There's not a single statute of limitations here that is in danger. Not one. I've talked about this many times here behind this microphone. They want a fast decision and a fast sentencing. But they know the whole process to appeal to the Circuit Court and the U.S. Supreme Court can take years. They've got their indictments. Now they want their trials. Then they want their convictions. And they want them as fast as possible. As for appeals to the circuit courts and the U.S. Supreme Court, they don't care if that takes forever. The damage is done. The election is over. Look what they did to Bob McDonnell. This is what Jack Smith does. Guilty at the trial level. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals upholds the guilt. And it finally gets to the Supreme Court 3.5 years later. And luckily they took up the case. And they said, nah, 8-0, one recused. No, that's not what the bribery statute says. That's not correct. 8-0. It included Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. 8-0. But it was too late. His marriage was ruined. He went broke. His reputation was tarnished. It was too late. We can't have that. The same individual involved in that, involved in this. And the Attorney General of the United States chose Jack Smith exactly for this reason. They wanted Bob McDonnell, Donald Trump. And they're going to get away with it if the Supreme Court doesn't step in. I know I'm calling for the Trump lawyers to do something that is unique. But given the circumstances, that's okay. Worst thing the court can say is no. But they need to help save the republic in our electoral system. That's what we're talking about now. The idea that a president can't challenge an election, whether he calls a person in a state, secretary of state, or a governor, can you find votes? I heard a liberal on Fox say that's kind of over the top. That's never over the top. Unless you say something that's illegal or criminal. Everybody says, can you find votes? Doesn't mean they mean, can you concoct votes or illegally create votes? Can you find votes? As for second set of electors, a couple of my friends on Fox are very good listeners to this program, Mr. Producer, as are others. It happened in 1960, and it also happened, so you'll start to hear this now, in 1876. Several states set two sets of electors. That's for Congress to sort out. There's not a criminal issue. There's not a criminal statute. There's not criminal intent. It's a vibrant, brutally fought election campaign. And did Donald Trump lie over and over again when he said the election was stolen? Because, we have some people who say that he knew that it wasn't stolen. It doesn't matter. I know for a fact he believed it. He still says it to me today. But let's say he doesn't believe it. Just for argument purposes. There's no crime in that. Also, it was very interesting, CNN, I forget her name, she had Bill Barr on her program. Bill Barr's making the rounds, as many grifters do. And his personal animus towards Trump knows no bounds. It even interferes with any rational analysis of the Constitution and the law. He made one of the stupidest comments, perhaps the second stupidest after Mike Pence. Well, even a conspiracy involves, speech. And you thought he was really onto something. I could see the LED light bulb in his brain pop up, 15 watts probably. No, that's right, Mr. Attorney General, but there is no conspiracy. You understand what I'm trying to say? And I've explained to people in the media and elsewhere that the 4 charges against the president involve statutes that have nothing to do with January 6th. One was passed so Grant could prosecute the Klan. 2 were passed post-Enron because the Enron executives had lied to Congress and were obstructing Congress from getting documents. So there's your obstruction. And then the first of the charges is a statute that has traditionally been used on financial crimes against the government. To some extent, it's been used about tainting the government, but not through elections. Now, these Enron statutes have been used to imprison a number of people from January 6th, the protesters. And that will be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The court hasn't heard it yet. But even at the circuit level, at least one judge said this is not correct. This doesn't apply to these circumstances. So what? We'll do it anyway. And we'll do it to a former president, and we'll do it to the potential presidential candidate of the other party. So how do you stop this? There's only one body that has the power to stop what's happening in our courts, and it's the most powerful court in the country, the only one that's mentioned in the Supreme Court. In the Constitution, that is, the Supreme Court. You have to hope there's enough of a majority there. You cobble together a majority. We'll put politics aside, put their social relationships and Washington, D.C. aside. I'm talking to you, John Roberts. You've been very, very poor on these cases. Very bad. And hope that finally Judge Barrett will meet the expectations that so many people had for her and so far been enormously disappointed. Or Kavanaugh will stop twisting words and twisting the law to accommodate some weird, moderate position that he seeks to take. Just uphold the Constitution, for God's sakes. That's all we ask. That's all we ask. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary efforts to get this in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. It's the only chance. And I do think a majority of that court, particularly when it comes to January 6th, are going to look at this and say, what are you doing? Now, Jack Smith's brief does prove one thing, ladies and gentlemen. The brief as is, who knows what he adds to it later. That Donald Trump did not further acts of suppression or any type of overthrow of the government and so forth and so forth. Because he's not charged with that. But what I was saying was there was an interview Barr did with a host on CNN, Caitlin, what's her name? Collins. And she asked him a question that despite all his interviews on cable TV, she's the first one to ask the question. And it went something like this. Were you questioned by the special counsel's office? And do you know what his answer was, America? I'm not comfortable getting into that. Cut 5, Mr. Producer. Go.
You spoke to the January 6th Congressional Committee. Have you talked to Jack Smith's investigators?
I'm not going to get into that.
Okay.
Wow, I'm not going to get into that. So he did. And he clearly went after Trump, based on what he's saying publicly. You have a former Attorney General of the United States who so hates his former boss, he'll say and do anything. You have a current Attorney General of the United States who so loves his current boss, he'll do anything in his defense. I have no doubt that Bill Barr told Jack Smith what he wanted to hear. There are other people whose voices, surprisingly, we don't hear. I'm not accusing them of anything. I don't know anything. Zero. But it's very strange that the president's former chief of staff appears nowhere. Isn't that weird, Mr. Producer? Had to be in on almost every meeting. This isn't personal with me. I'm just sitting here talking it through with the American people. Happen to be a big fan of Mark Meadows, at least now. I don't know what else has taken place. Well, time will tell. I make Mike Pence throw us a curveball. But we don't hear anything from him. He's like been in the witness protection program for 6 months. Nothing positive, nothing negative, nothing in any filings. It's okay. Nothing in any newspaper article. Zero. I just find it weird. Don't imply anything, period. And I don't want to hear any calls from anybody. It's just strange. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know what helps me sleep well at night? Physical gold. I'm concerned about what the Biden administration is doing, and I've decided to learn more about gold IRAs to help me diversify. Did you know you can buy gold for your IRA or 401k? Gold can't be tracked like digital currency. No one has to know what you're buying, and there's no way to print more. My best resource for gold IRAs is Augusta Precious Metals. Their track record is no less than phenomenal. Learn why thousands of Americans are getting gold IRAs as part of their retirement portfolios. And you need to contact Augusta Precious Metals and get their free guide. I'm serious. Text Levin to 68592. Again, text LEVIN to 68592. Levin to 68592, or go to AugustaPreciousMetals.com. That's AugustaPreciousMetals.com. Text date and message rates may apply. Performance varies. Consult your financial professionals before making investment decisions and get risk disclosures at AugustaPreciousMetals.com. Again, I'm not saying a candidate for president should be immune. I'm saying a candidate for president should not be subjected to an obvious strategy by the opposition party that happens to control all the instrumentalities of the federal government, including the most powerful and dangerous, to efforts that are intended to kill his candidacy in the crib, or as some would say, in the womb. That's the problem. And it's obvious that's what's going on here. And no, I do not believe, like some on Fox, that the Republicans, when they get in power, will do the same to the Democrats. No, they won't. They're screwing around on an impeachment hearing. They're screwing around on promoting a special counsel. They'd rather just keep wringing their hands. I want to strongly encourage you to check this out. Hear what they have to say. Because if you're getting smothered, you're drowning under debt, there could be a perfect way out for you. And American Financing will talk to you. There's no risk. There's no pressure. Maybe you have poor credit. They've dealt with a lot of people with great credit, poor credit. Doesn't matter. Check them out. 888-900-1828. I've got a lot more to say, ladies and gentlemen. Now, during the break, if you want to read all about it, this and much more, go to Amazon and get The Democrat Party Hates America. It's 20% off. Excuse me, it's 40% off. 40. I'll be right back. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. I'm going to read something to you because I think it's very important, and I think you're the smartest of all audiences. That's why you're here. What Biden has learned, what Franklin Roosevelt knew, and what the Democrat Party seeks is the importance of monopolizing the political system. Indeed, this is something Vladimir Lenin wrote about, insisted on, and instituted before, during, and after the Russian Revolution. The Democrat Party has, in fact, largely conquered America's cultural, educational, media institutions. But there still remains significant resistance. Millions of Americans reject its radical ideology, do not want to fundamentally transform America, and are now awake to what the Democrat Party is doing to destroy the country. Of course, the Constitution is written to limit the centralization and monopolization of power, that is, the Democrat Party's present-day power grabs. The Republican Party, while often anemic, if not ignorantly contributory to the Democrat Party's ambitions, is nonetheless an impediment by its mere existence. That said, there remain active efforts within the Republican Party, mostly elsewhere, to challenge the Democrat Party's growing tyranny. Clearly, power sharing is not and cannot be part of the Democrat Party's agenda. Frankly, like autocratic parties everywhere, the Democrat Party is intolerant of opposition and insists on absolute control. A democracy or republic consisting of multiple political parties competing for power is simply unacceptable to and incompatible with Marxism of any form or in any country, including the United States. Yet that is the unmistakable goal of the Democrat Party. As the late philosopher Raymond Aron explained, the party structure in America and other Western countries is based on the legality of opposition. The legality of opposition. A rare phenomenon in history. A constitutionally based peaceful rivalry. The legal exercise of power, the temporary exercise of power, and the legitimate method of exercising power. Importantly, he adds, the opposition accepts decisions which are taken legally by the government in power or the majority. But if a time comes when these decisions endanger its most vital interests, its very existence, will they not try to resist? There are circumstances in which a minority chooses to fight rather than submit. The smooth functioning of a Western regime depends then essentially on what the competing parties propose to do. The fundamental problem of Western democracy, he writes, the combination of national understanding and contestation, is easy or difficult to resolve according to the nature of the parties, the aims which they set themselves and the doctrines which they preach. But, writes Aron, when a party, one party alone, has the monopoly of political activity, the state is indissolubly linked to it, the state and the party. In a multi-party regime in the West, the state boasts of not being circumscribed by the ideas of any competing parties. The state is neutral through the fact that it tolerates a plurality of parties. So I write, in the United States, it can now be said that the monopoly party is the Democrat Party. Indeed, the vast administrative state, built mostly, albeit not exclusively, by the Democrat Party, issues edicts, dictates, regulations, rules, fines, penalties that serve the ideological purposes of the Democrat Party, whether or not the Democrat Party is in power. It requires the affirmative intervention of a Republican administration to roll back, stop, or fundamentally reverse the trajectory of administrative state decisions exercised on behalf of the Democrat Party. And most of the time, their efforts fail because the administrative state often seeks to sabotage Republican Party initiatives and policies or a Republican president through leaks, red tape, and internal countermands, thereby nullifying the decision of the electorate in a particular election cycle. In fact, it can be said that the administrative state has essentially become a permanent appendage of the Democrat Party. Consequently, even though elections are held, the Democrat Party is a permanent hold on major aspects of the government and policymaking. The more powerful the central government becomes, with ubiquitous tentacles, unlimited resources, and increasing police powers, the more powerful the Democrat Party becomes. Hence, the Democrat Party works tirelessly to not only protect its administrative state fiefdom, but to constantly strengthen and enlarge it. The Democrat Party is the party of the state. Now, as Aron describes it, in a one-party regime, the state is the party state, inseparable from the party which monopolizes legitimate political activity. If, instead of a state of parties, a party state exists, the state will be obliged to restrict freedom of political discussion. Since the state presupposes as absolutely valid the ideology of the monopolistic party, it cannot officially allow this ideology to be called into question. In fact, the restriction on freedom of political discussion varies in degree according to the regimes of a single party, but the essence of a single-party regime, which I'm arguing we now have in America, in which the state is defined by the ideology of the monopolistic party, is not to accept all the ideas and to prevent some bad ideas relating to the party from being openly debated. And this is where the Democrat Party has driven the nation. The power and control of the Democrat Party and allegiance to it and to its ideology above all else are now the objective of the state. This is evident in the media, social sites, entertainment, and academia. And at least with regard to those who do not belong to the monopolistic party, says Aron, the party state reserves for itself almost unbounded possibilities of action. Besides, if the monopoly is justified by the vastness of the revolutionary changes to be achieved, how can one ask the exercise of power to be moderate and even legal? Exactly, ladies and gentlemen. Now, for those of us who love our country and the principles and values on which it was founded, the Democrat Party has pushed and dragged the nation into a very dangerous and perilous place. Decades of usurpations of the Constitution, family, and faith, and abuses of power and governance in support of so-called progressive or, more to the point, Marxist theories and models of ruling are destroying our country from within. And the pace of the decay has quickened and the extent has broadened. And of course, through it all, the Democrat Party has become more powerful and omnipresent in our everyday lives. Just 2.5 to 3 pages in The Democrat Party Hates America. And those of you who have stepped up, have gone to Amazon or other retail links to pre-order your copies, I want to thank you in advance. You are truly great patriots, and you are truly trying to delve into what is taking place at breakneck speed in this country. And you will be ready, you will be informed of the battle of ideas, because that's where we are, the battle of ideas. If we lose the battle of ideas, which is why they're brainwashing in our schools and all the rest, then we lose, period. Then we lose, period. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know what company's looking for you when they actually upgrade your service and don't charge you for it? This is great news, and for new and current Pure Talk customers. Pure Talk just added data to every plan and is including a mobile hotspot with each one, with no price increase whatsoever. Now, if you've considered Pure Talk before but haven't pulled the trigger, take a look again. Just $20 a month for unlimited talk, text, and now 50% more 5G data, plus mobile hotspot. Just $20 a month, folks. This is why I love Pure Talk. That also happens to be veteran-owned and only hires the best customer service team right here in America. Most families are saving almost $1,000 a year while enjoying the most dependable 5G network in America. Just go to puretalk.com and enter promo code Levin Podcast to make the switch to Pure Talk, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month. Again, go to puretalk.com, enter promo code LEVIN Podcast, and make the switch to my cell phone company, Pure Talk, today. Freedom House that I discussed the other day, sort of a center-left group, but really it's not one of these radical kook groups. It really tries to do well in terms of monitoring fascism and Marxism and the like. It argues that majoritarianism, stick with me, majoritarianism is a signal idea of many authoritarians who use it for the proposition that elections are winner-take-all affairs in which the victor has an absolute mandate with little or no interference from institutional checks and balances. Now, I say, of course, this is evident in Democrat Party efforts to eliminate the Electoral College, which has as its purpose to select presidents and vice presidents based solely on the popular vote. That is, they do. This would result in Democrat Party-run metropolitan areas, mostly on the East and West Coast, where a significant and crucial population of the Democrat Party base reside, essentially controlling the outcome of every election. No longer would states with smaller populations, rural areas, etc., have any effective say in the selection of presidents and vice presidents. Indeed, listen to this, only 9 states, the most populous states, almost all of which are Democrat except for Florida and Texas, only 9 states make up 50% of the nation's population. Thus, representative government, where all areas of the country have a say in the conduct of the national government, would end. And this is their effort right now. Tens of millions of people would be without meaningful input in governmental affairs, most of whom just happen to be Republicans and independents. Representative government would be over for tens of millions of American citizens. To underscore what I'm saying here, the Democrat Party wants to pack the Supreme Court, as you know, with more Democrats by adding Puerto Rico and Washington as new states, producing 4 more Democrat senators, eliminate the Senate filibuster, enabling a simple majority to make enduring changes to the country, expanding the Supreme Court in order to pack it. So ultimately, they are in charge of the law, like they are right now when it comes to the Justice Department and the FBI. And meanwhile, even if Democrats were to lose elections, they have the permanent administrative state, which it has created, populated, subsidizes, and does its bidding. That's what's going on. That's why I want you to read this. These are just a couple of sentences out of this book. And Mr. Producer, when I read different sections, he says, wow, that's good. Wow, that's important. I agree. But you really need to sit down and digest the whole thing. You can use it as reference for forevermore, but digest the whole thing. It's about $18 on Amazon. It typically retails apparently for $30. You can pre-order your copies now. But it lays it all out, what you're seeing with Trump and all the rest of it. This is a party that needs to be focused on. This is a party that needs to be exposed. This is a party that needs to be destroyed if we are to survive as a free people, because they don't believe in these things that you and I believe in. I want to repeat, particularly for the backbenchers and others who might be listening, there's enough information, overwhelming amount of information now, and it's just topped off, the icing on the cake with the Devin Archer transcript that was released yesterday, and I'm not going to discuss it again. We discussed it yesterday, that Joe Biden committed a crime. And so I want to inform MSLSD and the Constipated News Network, Joe Biden committed a crime. Joe Biden is and was a co-conspirator in Hunter Biden's multiple violations of FARA, where if you represent a foreign government, a foreign corporation, you don't even have to take money from them under FARA. You just introduce a foreign government or foreign company to somebody or somebody. It's very broad. Now, it typically wasn't used. It was only used 7 times as in terms of criminal prosecutions, only successful 3 or 4 out of those 7 times prior to the attack on Paul Manafort by Mueller and Weissman. And Weissman has his hand in on the special counsel in this case, too, by the way. He worked with Jack Smith when Weissman was general counsel of the FBI. You can see what's going on here, can't you? And also, a letter from Joe Biden has been released where it's clear that Joe Biden has a fairly significant amount of knowledge about his son's goings-on. We have testimony from Bob Linsky. We now have testimony from Archer. We have testimony from others. There's a reason why these IRS whistleblowers were cut off. It wasn't because of Hunter. It was in order to protect Joe Biden. It was cut off by Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice. I want to encourage the Republican leaders, my friends on Capitol Hill, of which there's about 7. You don't need to wait anymore. You need to have impeachment inquiry. You've got more than enough. As we concluded here, I guess it was last week or earlier this week, we look at all this information involving the prior corrupt government in Ukraine that Zelensky replaced. You look at the firing of the prosecutor there at the demand of Joe Biden, who was bragging about it. The reason they impeached Trump the first go-round, because of a phone call that we all thought was perfectly fine, was to create a political rail that could not be touched. Because I think many people knew. We didn't, but many on the Democrat side knew. Or at least they got the directive from the White House. Or should I say from Joe Biden from his basement. That Ukraine and Burisma could destroy a Biden presidential candidacy. Because Trump was right to want Zelensky to look into what took place there. Because we now know that the former chief executive and executives of Burisma were paying Hunter Biden and desperately seeking to influence this investigation to stop it. And the only reason they were paying him was to try and get word to his daddy. The only reason. So it's really quite remarkable. So I will continue to say until others say, and Jim Comer's come very close to it, Mr. Producer, have you noticed? He said, you know, maybe Biden's in violation of the FARA law. No, but he is a co-conspirator in the violation of his son. Multiple violations. That much we know. And not just a little bit, a lot. I'll be right back. You know a company's looking for you when they actually upgrade your service and don't charge you for it? This is great news, and for new and current Pure Talk customers. Pure Talk just added data to every plan and is including a mobile hotspot with each one, with no price increase whatsoever. Now, if you've considered Pure Talk before but haven't pulled the trigger, take a look again. Just $20 a month for unlimited talk, text, and now 50% more 5G data, plus mobile hotspot. Just $20 a month, folks. This is why I love Pure Talk. That also happens to be veteran-owned and only hires the best customer service team right here in America. Most families are saving almost $1,000 a year while enjoying the most dependable 5G network in America. Just go to puretalk.com and enter promo code Levin Podcast to make the switch to Pure Talk, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month. Again, go to puretalk.com, enter promo code LEVIN Podcast, and make the switch to my cell phone company, Pure Talk, today.
Mark Levin, an unapologetic patriot and unapologetic constitutionalist. You can reach him at 877-381-3811.
I have another thought, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad you're here because I have a lot of thoughts running through the cranium lately, or more than usual. And I will post this as well. Should Donald Trump get elected, he should pardon himself from everything Biden, Garland, and Smith are throwing at him during the course of this campaign. Moreover, although I have concurred with those who argue that a president cannot pardon himself respecting non-federal charges, in other words, that's not his bailiwick, nonetheless, he should assert the supremacy clause, Mr. Producer, and pardon himself from state and local prosecutors' charges or any convictions launched against him during the course of this federal campaign. And then sort it out. I mean, I don't know why the left, in promoting their autocracy and tyranny, their burn everything down, baby. I don't know why that's acceptable, but defending yourself by using whatever tools might be available is not. I don't buy that anymore. I just don't. I sit here and I try and mull over what's taking place and what can be done. I mean, it's very difficult when you're dealing with lawlessness and the enshrinement of lawlessness by courts as well as the participant in the justice system. So that's why I'm trying to figure out ways to get out of the box. It's all new territory, but Trump is not required to accept what is being done to him by the Democrat Party. So again, should Trump get elected? He should pardon himself from everything Biden, Garland, Smith are throwing at him during the course of this campaign. Everything. And although I've concurred with those who argue that a president cannot pardon himself respecting non-federal charges, I'm having second thoughts about this. I really am, under the circumstances. And it ought to be tested. Let them chase Trump. Let them chase the law for once. Why not? I really believe it. Boy, oh boy, Mr. Bruce, I'm going to take a lot of hits, aren't I, out there? Oh, among the corrupt Democrat Party media for the things I'm saying and posting this evening, aren't I? Oh, well, I'm sorry, not. They're the enemy. You're going to have to get used to that fact. That's why I told you earlier in the week, I went to the local store here and I did something. I wasted $16. I bought a New York Times, a Washington Post, a USA Today, and a Wall Street Journal. And on the front page, every front page after the Devin Archer testimony on Monday, not one headline, not one front page story. None. Now, the next day, when the shoe on January 6th dropped, some shoe, more like an old sneaker. And people have showed you the timing, how preposterous it is. It's just outrageous what's going on in order to try and control the public spin, the media spin. They dropped this stuff on Trump right after there's headway made against the Bidens. I got the newspapers then, blazing headlines like Apollo 11 man on the moon. Trump indicted. Here's Bill Barr again on CNN yesterday. Listen to this and tell me if you can even follow it. Cut 6, go.
Do you think he knew that he lost the election?
Do I personally believe that? Yeah, at first I wasn't sure. But
No, not you. She's saying you. No, does Ernie Grabotsky, your neighbor, think that? What a dim-witted guy. I never realized how dim-witted he was. Go ahead.
Knew well that he had lost the election. And
so what?
No.
So what? First of all, it's not true that he knew well. But what if he did or didn't? Who cares? What is the violation? Ladies and gentlemen, what is the crime here? There's no criminal statutes covering this. None. None. Not one. So Bill Barr's buying off on this fool Jack Smith's use of the law, which he's used in the past, against the Tea Party, against McDonnell, against Menendez, against many others. This lawlessness. Bill Barr's now all in. Go ahead.
What's important is the government has assumed the burden of proving that. The government, in their indictment...
What's important is, Bill, is that when you're charging somebody in the course of a campaign, we're not talking about the burden of proof and proving it right now. It's the indictments themselves that are intended to have consequences. It's the process that's intended to destroy the candidate. whatever the outcome may eventually be. That's the point, Bill. Go ahead.
That he had actual knowledge that he had lost the election and the election wasn't stolen through fraud. And they're going to have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Which is a high bar.
So it's bogus. It's ridiculous. Even by Bill Barr's terms, if to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But why should he have to prove anything? He's allowed to say whatever he wants. Hillary Clinton knows she lost the 2016 election. She hasn't been charged with it. It's amazing. She's the perfect example of the problem. Blows out 32,000 emails. No problem. They were subpoenaed. No problem. Destroys evidence on cell phone. No problem. No problem. Has classified information on her server at home. No problem. Trump, they throw the book at him. Get a warrant. SWAT team. 40 indictments. 40 charges. Go ahead.
Barr. Now, that leads me to believe that we're only seeing a tip of the iceberg on this.
You think Jack Smith has more?
Oh, yes.
What does that mean, the tip of the iceberg on this? Oh, no, you understand. We have information that other people told Donald Trump that he lost. And that Donald Trump acknowledged he lost when he told Mike Pence, you're too honest. Okay, and the crime is what? Well, we found a statute. We found 4. 2 involving Enron, 1 involving the Klan, and another one typically used in financial crimes. We're going to stretch those babies. We're going to use them because it's the process, it's the charges. And we might get lucky. We might get a couple of guilty verdicts. I mean, and after all, it is D.C., and we have the most loathsome Obama judge ever appointed. Go ahead.
I believe he has a lot more, and that's one of the things that impressed me about the indictment. It was very spare, and there are a lot of things he could have said in there.
You know, he's impressed by this indictment, which every clown knows is absurd. And it's very spare, you see. You know, it lacks stuff, like actual fraud, like actual obstruction, like actual denying voters the right to vote, particularly black people under the 1871 statute. It's very spare, you know. I'm very impressed by this indictment. God almighty. Go ahead.
And I think there's a lot more to come, and I think they have a lot more evidence as to President Trump's state of mind.
You said you've come around to...
they have evidence of President Trump's state of mind. It's amazing. They have evidence of his state of mind, America. Did you ever think we'd reach this point? Any of you Supreme Court justices listening to this? I got to believe you guys are sitting there just shaking your heads, right? Particularly when we're talking about political speech during the course of an election. Where does this end? Go ahead.
Do you think he knew that he lost? Why have you come around to that?
You know, you're stupid, lady, with your stupid-ass questions. Do you even understand the law or the history or free speech or all the rest of it? Here you have 2 low IQ people talking to each other and a low-rated network on top of it. What makes you think he knew? Yes. Well, I read his palm, you see, and there was a long line right down the middle of his right palm. And my experience is with the long line on the right palm, I can read his mind, and his mind says that he knows he's not telling the truth. This isn't a First Amendment issue. This isn't a First Amendment. You can conspire and speak, you know. Conspire about what? Well, fraud. Fraud of what? Well, just of. If this got to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court's awake, this would be kicked so far and so fast it's not even funny. But it's the process. That's why you got to try and file for an emergency hearing and make a case, a strong case, that it'll be too late for the court to fix this rudderless ship. The election will be over. The damage will be done. Go ahead.
number one, comments from people like Bannon and...
is this guy an idiot? So who cares what Bannon and people like Stone said? Well, they said that they were ready. They were ready for the claim that the election was stolen. So what? What crime is that? You may not like it. You may not agree. What's the crime? We're talking about a crime, putting somebody in prison. And this guy was the Attorney General of the United States. Shocking. Cut 7, go.
They're also saying that he was just exercising his First Amendment right here. Do you think that's a valid argument in your view?
No, I really don't think that's a valid argument because, as the indictment says, they're not attacking his First Amendment right. He can say whatever he wants. He can even...
No, he can't say whatever he wants. And they are attacking his First Amendment right. And why are you regurgitating one of the stupidest parts of these charges? He can say whatever he wants. He's free to say whatever he wants. Unless, of course, we don't think he is. Go ahead.
Tell people that the election was stolen when he knew better, but that does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. All conspiracies involve speech, and
does anybody have any idea what this buffoon is saying? He's become a buffoon. That does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. A conspiracy to do what? To say that the election was stolen when you knew it wasn't stolen. First of all, that's not a crime. Second of all, he believed it was stolen. He still talks about it today, which is against his own best interest because a lot of people are tired of hearing about it. Doesn't even make any sense. Unbelievable. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know what company's looking for you when they actually upgrade your service and don't charge you for it? This is great news and for new and current Pure Talk customers. Pure Talk just added data to every plan and is including a mobile hotspot with each one with no price increase whatsoever. Now, if you've considered Pure Talk before but haven't pulled the trigger, take a look again. Just $20 a month for unlimited talk, text, and now 50% more 5G data plus mobile hotspot. Just $20 a month, folks. This is why I love Pure Talk. That also happens to be veteran-owned and only hires the best customer service team right here in America. Most families are saving almost $1,000 a year while enjoying the most dependable 5G network in America. Just go to puretalk.com and enter promo code Levin Podcast to make the switch to Pure Talk, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month. Again, go to puretalk.com, enter promo code LEVIN Podcast. And make the switch to my cell phone company, Pure Talk, today. I'm sick of hearing Bill Barr's voice. I can even imitate him now, Mr. Producer. Well, just do your average nerd. Well, you can actually have a conspiracy in speech. A conspiracy to commit fraud in speech. And what would that be? I don't know. I just like hearing myself speak. Plus, you invited me here, and you have the best donuts of any green room of any network. I understand, America, that Vivek Ramaswamy will be on the program in about 5 to 10 minutes. Is that right, Mr. Producer? Wow. They changed the time again today. Is that correct, too? Okay, so I'm hoping he'll be on the program. It's going to be a very positive experience for the man. I don't know what they're so worried about. He's not Bill Barr. He's not Chris Christie. They're not out trying to destroy the country. Comes across to me as a very intelligent gentleman. But I don't know a damn thing about him. So I want to learn more about him, and I think you should know more about him, not just his business background, but where has he been for the last 30 years? I just have a question, a few questions, that's all. I'll bet he has good answers. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. It's now a pleasure to have Vivek Ramaswamy. How are you, sir?
Good to be on, Mark. How are you?
We finally made it, Vivek. Here we are.
I'm glad.
All right, I'm fine, thank you. You're one of the most articulate politicians, or new politicians, I've ever heard. One of the most intelligent. You have really a very fine gift in this, and that's very important, communication and so forth. You're a very successful businessman at a very young age, self-made. And these are very, very important qualities, particularly for conservatives, I think. But I want you to tell me, and I'm serious about this, and I asked the other candidates too, those who are willing to come on, how do we know you're a conservative? You don't have a long history of conservative activity. I'm not even talking about government, politics, maybe your associations, maybe your donations, maybe your speeches. And so 3, 4, 5, 6 years before you decided to run, were you involved in anything? Or explain, but however you wish.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, I'll share with you that, first of all, my career was as an entrepreneur, right? So it wasn't in professional politics. And I think that's going to be one of the things that allows me to actually govern.
Don't get mad at me. I'm not. I agree with you on that. That's not my point.
So let me tell you.
But hold on. I just want to make a point. There are businessmen. There are other people who do their thing who are not in professional politics. In fact, they're not even in politics. But they get involved in various conservative causes and so forth. I'm going to let you speak. I just wanted to sort of focus in on the point. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been donors to, and I don't like to flaunt it, but millions of dollars in recent years in donations to conservative causes across this country, and even some that I continue through this presidential campaign. I mean, I've recently, for example, endowed an American Identity Scholarship to foster national pride in the next generation. Been a large supporter of the America First Policy Institute, for the Heritage Foundation. I've been on the Council for National Policy. You may be familiar with CNP, but I've been, their top-tier membership for a long time, helping guide and direct what I think of as the future of the conservative movement. I think that the Philanthropy Roundtable was one of the organizations that I've served on the board of, which has been fighting the woke cancer in the philanthropy industrial complex. Mark, but probably the biggest piece of this was a few years ago, the conditions under which I made a decision to step down from my job, comfortable job as a biotech CEO. I had led that company as CEO for 7 years. But when the George Floyd-related, post-George Floyd death, Black Lives Matter protests were raging across this country, there was a demand for me to do the same thing that every other biotech CEO was effectively required to do. Pay homage to the temple of BLM, praise them, maybe make a donation. I refused to do it. That led to a series of controversies that actually led to a couple advisors from my company resigning, and I had to face the choice of whether I was going to bend the knee and stay in a cush position or whether I was going to take the sacrifice of speaking my mind without apology but have to separate myself from the company to do it. And that's the choice I made. And so, the thing about me, Mark, is I've written 3. I know you're a prolific writer, but I have written 3 books in the last couple of years myself that detail a lot of these experiences. They're not typical candidate books. These are books that delve into substance, but a lot of my personal story is woven in there, too. And I think that'll give you some sense that, yes, I haven't been in politics, but at least in the last, probably 3 to 4 years of my life, 3 years in particular, this has been my life's work in the last 3 years in my post-business career, and now we're continuing it to actually see it all the way through.
You're running a very fascinating campaign. On the one hand, so far you seem to be able to walk the line between I'll call it soft criticism of President Trump, but then on the other hand, I would say appropriate outrage at what's being done against him. Have I described that about right?
Well, I would say, I would describe it a little bit differently. I think that President Trump was, an excellent president. And I think that his win over Hillary Clinton in 2016 was probably the single most important political event in my lifetime, certainly, and in this 21st century, that stopped the inevitable leftward march through our government institutions at the very least. And so for that reason, I feel, particularly during an election where I'm running against him, some sense of obligation not to just throw that legacy under the bus and start criticizing him. So I wouldn't even call it soft criticism. But what I would say is I'm unafraid of drawing contrasts with any candidate, right? On policy, on style, on approach. And it turns out we have mostly overlap. But you're right, I'm not afraid to draw my contrast with anybody. I don't believe in criticizing my fellow candidates here. But drawing contrasts, I'm happy to do. And I think that that's a good description of, I think, the way we're thinking about this campaign and the way I'll continue to run it to the very end.
Let me ask you this. You know, there may be candidates I agree with mostly or disagree with mostly, but there's some candidates who are really like human torpedoes. They want to get on that debate stage for the purpose of trashing one or another candidate. I'm talking about Chris Christie in particular. You're seeing more of this from Mike Pence, although I don't think he's going to be able to get on the debate stage. Are you concerned about candidates like that who may take up all the oxygen and get all the headlines when they're really going nowhere, but they serve the purposes of the Democrat Party media?
Well, I'm not concerned about it. I do find it somewhat irritating only because I think it doesn't help us in our quest to select the best nominee for U.S. president, which is what the job of the Republican primary is. I think we should be talking about what do we stand for, why do we stand for it, and then get to the question of who is going to best advance that agenda. I personally believe, Mark, one of the subjects near and dear to my heart is shutting down the unconstitutional administrative state. One of the reasons I am in this race is I think I'm probably the single candidate in the last 30 years who has the best understanding of how to actually get that job done. Those are the kinds of issues I'd like to be talking about rather than hurling.
So how would you do that?
Yeah. Well, I think that it takes a unique combination of not only having been a CEO and a business guy like Trump, I've built multi-billion-dollar businesses and led them, and I'm willing to break glass. But it takes somebody who has also an understanding, Mark, of the laws and constitution of this country. And that's the combination I'm bringing to the table, where actually it's a myth that the civil service protections would stop a U.S. president from reorganizing the government. That's what they told Trump. Well, the advisors were wrong, and that's why you need a president who understands the law himself. The civil service protections apply to individual firings of one-off government employees. They do not apply to mass layoffs, and mass layoffs are absolutely what I am bringing to the D.C. federal bureaucracy. When you think about reorganizing or shutting down branches of the administrative state, like the Department of Education or the FBI, and I think we've laid out in our campaign unprecedented detail of the mechanics of how we would actually get it done. It turns out there are reorganization statutes, one dating from 1977, that says under limited circumstances, the U.S. president can do this without asking Congress for permission or forgiveness if it stimulates the economy or reduces redundant agencies. And so, Mark, I come back to that. It takes that special combination of someone who, yes, is an outsider, isn't beholden, can actually see that through as an executive, but also somebody who actually understands the law and constitution of this country. And that's a rare combination, and that's part of what draws me into this race.
I think this is very important. I remember in the Reagan administration, we had what we called reductions in force. That's what I think you're talking about. And
yes.
You do not need legislation to do that. But
Exactly.
Here's what happens. Here's what happens. Congress says, don't do that. Well, I can do it. I'm going to do it. Okay, you're going to do that? Yes. Okay, you know that defense budget bill you want? Yes. Well, you're not going to get it. What do you do in a circumstance? In other words, what I'm saying is,
yeah, I understand.
there is this. Hold on now. There is this hurly-burly that takes place. What do you do in a case like that? I have my own thoughts. I'm curious. What would you do?
Well, look, let me say what my first intention is first. I am an optimist, and I am aspirational for what I want to achieve for this country. I think that we need a landslide election. You brought up Reagan, a 1980 or 1984 Reagan-style moral mandate. We haven't had one in a very long time in this country. And I think that we're in a moment where the rot of the administrative state has already been exposed, even to many elected official Republicans who will be part of that landslide, that was the big service that Trump did for the country, is exposing that rot. I think that with that landslide election, I will have at least the first 2 years to take a quantum leap forward Mark, before there's any of the, what you would call modifying effects that you might see from then a broken Congress. And so that's what I'm laser focused on. And I do think, I'm going to be frank with you, I think there are many other Republican candidates in this race who can defeat Joe Biden, who are good people. But I think I'm the only candidate, Mark, who can actually win this election in an unequivocal landslide because of what we already see. We're bringing young people with us. 40% of my donors are first-time ever donors to the Republican Party in any form, compared to 2% for normal candidates. That's what I think it's going to require to drive actual change, not just incremental reform, but a sort of revolution, which is what I think we need.
How are you going to get around these states, particularly, Reagan won, massive number of states, massive Electoral College victories. He won states nobody thought he could. And then you have states like California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey that have changed their election rules and really quite corrupt in ways that make it very, very difficult to win in these states. I was a Reagan guy in 76, campaigned for him in 76 and 80, worked in his administration for 8 years. We had 2 massive landslides. I think that would be almost impossible to pull off today. I really do, because of the way they've changed the election procedures, no?
Well, Mark, I think that if you had said that in the summer of 1979, one would have said that was impossible, too.
No, but it wasn't the same thing in 1979. A lot has happened since then.
Circumstances have changed, but people in 79 might have said the same. But look, here's what I'll say, is that I'm already doing my best to get a head start on it. I'm going to the south side of Chicago. I've campaigned in Kensington, in the inner city of Philadelphia. I'm reaching young people, college campuses, disproportionately focusing on young people. I think young people are part of the key, Mark, to do this, where part of what we tend to believe is that they're part of the neo-progressive, neo-Marxist left. When, in fact, when it's talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, really, or recent young adults, they're just hungry for a cause, actually. They are starved for purpose and meaning. They're just lost. And I think that one of the things I'm doing in this campaign is I'm leading us not just to run from something. I'm leading us to start running to something. And that really resonates with young people and brings along people who might have thought of themselves as, even a Bernie Sanders voter, that actually come along and say, you know what, if individual, family, nation, and God are filling the vacuum in my heart more than race, gender, sexuality, and climate, maybe I'll try the other thing this time. That's what we're seeing across the country. So I'm hopeful, Mark. I'm not saying that nothing's definite, right? We have our challenges ahead of us, but I certainly think I am the candidate who is best positioned to deliver that landslide as the youngest person ever to run for president in our party. I think the traction we're seeing is good evidence of that already this early on, going from 0.0 to third place in the Republican national polling, and the donor base that's particularly unique of small dollar donors we've built up. So it's early, but I am hopeful, and I think that that's the best chance we have.
I will say this. You are a very positive voice in this race. I listen to some of these guys. I'm just being honest. I'm not saying you're Pollyanna. I'm saying, again, when I listen to the Christies or listen to some of the backbenchers like Larry Hogan or Asa Hutchinson, these guys, you're ready to just throw in the towel about what's taking place in the Republican Party and so forth. And so they don't have anything to draw support. They'll draw attention, say, on Meet the Press or Face the Nation or something like that. But they have no base. And you're going out there, you're trying to create your own base. Is that about right?
That is about right. Exactly. And I think that will be good for our movement. And, my view, Mark, in this is I'm going to speak the truth at every step. And I would rather lose the election than to play some political snakes and ladders. So I have invested over $15 million of my hard-earned money in this campaign rather than asking a bunch of mega donors for permission to run. I don't think super PAC puppets are good for our party or for our electoral process, but I believe that the way we're doing this is I'm a patriot who speaks truth. And if you want to stand on the side of revolution over incremental reform, then that's great. I'm going to tell the people of this country who I am and what I believe and what I stand for. And if that's what they want, then I'll be the next president. But if everybody in this country knows who I am and what I want, and they want to go a different direction, I'm at peace with that as well. That's the whole strategy of this campaign, is to be just that direct about it and unattached to the result. but I'm called to serve. And if the people of this country feel like they need to call me to serve as the next president, I'll do that for the next 8 years. And I'm confident that when I leave office in January 2033, we won't have an administrative state. We will be independent of China. We will not depend on our enemy for our modern way of life. We will be growing at a 4+% GDP growth rate again. And most importantly, young Americans will be proud of being citizens of this country again, which is, I think, the single most important thing I can deliver.
Well, I'm glad you came on. I think you made a very strong case for yourself, Vivek, and I want to wish you a lot of safety and success out there. And if people want to help, where do they go?
Go to Vivek2024.com, Vivek 2024.com. We prefer volunteers to donors, though we'll take both, and I appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity, Mark.
All right, God bless. Take care of yourself. Be well. He's a very nice gentleman, isn't he, Mr. Producer? Very likable. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, a lot of people say that social media has had an enormously divisive and negative impact on our society and on our culture. I would throw in MSNBC and CNN. CNN broke from its original business model, and because it is owned by a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, it can lose money left and right and nobody will notice. MSNBC is owned by Comcast, a multi-billion-dollar American company, cable, that shakes you down effectively and rips you off effectively every month. So they don't much care about ratings either. But they bring in the most vile, partisan, sickening, ignorant hacks imaginable. And I'm talking about the hosts in the newsroom. Wait till you get to the guests. So these two corporations, I believe CNN is still owned by Times Warner, AT&T, and of course MSNBC is owned by Comcast. These corporations are responsible for much of the hate, for much of what's going on in this country. So we talk about social media, or other people do, but these two institutions, these two platforms specifically, of course we know about the New York Times, we know about the Washington Post. We know about them. But these two cable networks specifically, they don't even pretend to be balanced. They are unbalanced. In fact, they're ill. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin, the thunder on the right. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
So Devin Archer testifies, spills as much of his guts as he can. There's nothing in it for him. He's going to prison thanks to his fraudulent activity. But of course, Hunter Biden, they're working very, very hard. The Biden lawyers at the Department of Justice and the Barr lawyers for Hunter. Maybe they're from the same group. I don't know. They're working very hard to try and figure out how to walk a fine line in order to accommodate the judge, who apparently doesn't want to be fooled by anything. So Catherine Herridge is on CBS News. She's fantastic. And you have this moron, Dan Goldman, who was a former federal prosecutor out of the Southern District of New York. Complete a-hole, very low IQ, which makes you wonder about that Southern District of New York. Here she is. Cut 15, go.
Well, earlier this week, we just had to rely on the characterization from Republicans and Democrats about Devin Archer's testimony, but now we can see the full transcript. You'll recall that Democrat Congressman Dan Goldman said that Archer testified that it was the illusion of access to Joe Biden that Hunter Biden was offering to these clients. But in fact, when you look at the transcript, what you see is that that phrase, illusion of access, is in Dan Goldman's question. It's actually not what Devin Archer testified to. He says, yes, but that's not quite fair. This was about showing that there was the signal that there's influence and access here.
What kind of a person could live with themselves? Like this guy, Dan, what is his name again? Dan Goldman? They want to see Trump in prison. They want to see him die there. And then look at this sleazeball. He uses a word, then he puts it in Devin Archer's mouth. Then they say, release the full transcript. We'll show you that it wasn't really that bad. Devin Archer really didn't make these accusations. They release it, and it's worse than anybody thought. So Devin Archer never said what Dan Goldman said he said. It was in Dan Goldman's question. So he lied. Should go to prison, I think, Mr. Producer. Should be indicted and go to prison immediately. That's the new standard. I mean, we won't have a Democrat Party. They'll all be in Sing Sing or somewhere from where they'll be operating, I suppose. Mr. Producer, do we have any callers? I'd be surprised because I've been talking for days and days and days with all this stuff going on. Yep. Tony, Clifton, New Jersey. Tony, how are you, sir?
Hi, Mark. It's Tony, Miss Tony. How are you, my friend?
Oh, good. Tony, T-O-N-I.
Yes, T-O-N-I.
How are you?
I want to say something first. I'm good, thank you. I want to say something first to make you laugh, and then I want to tell you what I did today. So Ronald Reagan said, the most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. So,
these
past few days have been very stressful for all of us. So thank you for what you did today. I just love it. I just feel so encouraged by it. And I have been sort of thinking in my head, what can I do? And I frequently reach out to Speaker McCarthy, and I go through my congressman, and I communicated. You could call them and you can get someone. And I communicated my feelings, and I said, I grew up in the time of Kennedy's assassination, the Kennedys and Martin Luther King. I said, and so I'm taking what's happening here very seriously because, first of all, the office of president is being diminished and, destroyed as they do everything, the Democrats. And also because a president is going through all this that no one has gone through before. And because I'm also worried about safety and well-being for the country. And I said, if there's anything you could do to stop the wheels from being in motion, please do, because this is a very serious matter.
Mm-hmm. We don't have all night, so go ahead. Yep.
So when history is written, I don't want you guys to be held accountable. If people don't do their part, we're going to be in a mess. That's all. Thanks.
100% right, Tony. 100% right. And one of these days you'll get the hell out of that blue state. Because that's going from bad to worse. And I want to thank you very, very much. Neil Gorsuch, in a little noticed concurring opinion in Arizona versus Mayorkas, May 2023. Here's what he said. Listen to this. He wrote, since March 2020, we may have experienced the greatest intrusion on civil liberties in the peacetime history of this country. Neil Gorsuch, in this opinion. Executive officials across the country issued emergency decrees on a heartbreaking scale. Governors and local leaders imposed lockdown orders forcing people to remain in their homes. They shuttered businesses and schools, public and private. They closed churches even as they allowed casinos and other favored businesses to carry on. They threatened violators not just with civil penalties but with criminal sanctions too. They surveilled church parking lots, recorded license plates, and issued notices warning that attendance at even outdoor services satisfying all state social distancing and hygiene requirements could amount to criminal conduct. Federal executive officials entered the act, too. They deployed a public health agency to regulate landlord-tenant relations nationwide. They used a workplace safety agency to issue a vaccination mandate for most working Americans. They threatened to fire non-compliant employees and warned that service members who refused to vaccinate might face dishonorable discharge and confinement. Along the way, it seems federal officials may have pressured social media companies to censor information about pandemic policies with which they disagreed. The concentration of power in the hands of so few may be efficient and sometimes popular, but it does not tend towards sound government. However wise one person or his advisors may be, that is no substitute for the wisdom of the whole of the American people. That can be tapped into the legislative process. Decisions made by a few often yield unintended consequences that may be avoided when more are consulted. Autocracies have always suffered these defects. When you're dealing with somebody like with a mind like that, or an Alito or a Thomas, I've got to believe at least those three would be amenable to emergency filing like nothing ever seen, quite frankly, to deal with nothing like nothing we've ever seen in this election. I've got to believe that's the case, because that's what needs to be done. And to try and fail is okay, but to not try and to ensure failure is not okay. That's where I'm coming from. And I don't care what candidate you support. I don't care what party you're in. As I say in Chapter 8, and I read that to you from Chapter 7, actually the last chapter, the epilogue, but I want to read this to you in Chapter 7. The Democrat Party's scorched earth, unscrupulous, and unconscionable political and criminal persecution of Donald Trump is totalitarian in every respect. The Democrats and their media talked about impeaching Trump long before he entered the Oval Office. And they are talking about it again, even before he wins a re-election. Democrat Party indicted Trump on 2 phony impeachments. Now Trump stands indicted by an elected Democrat DA in New York. Utterly bogus, politically motivated case involving non-disclosure agreements. Another elected Democrat district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, covering most of Atlanta, Fannie Taffy Willis. She's ready to unleash her indictments. The elected Attorney General, Democrat, in New York, she's unleashed a score plus a dozen civil fraud charges against the president and his family. While he was president, Trump was subjected to a multi-year, multi-million-dollar federal investigation based on Democrat Party and media accusations, ginned up by Hillary Clinton and a law firm. So-called Russia dossier, funded by Clinton. That was the launching point for the Democrat Party media and FBI allegations against Trump. Former FBI Director James Comey, despite knowing that the dossier was false, used it to threaten Trump and to unleash a massive investigation against him. Think about all these things that have been going on. All these things. We have the Durham report that tells you how corrupt the FBI is. It's absolutely shocking. I really do wish that the Democrat Party Hates America was out right now. I wish it was out now so it could help us deal with what's taking place in the country right now, and you'll understand it when you get the book. But we have to wait until September 19th. A lot can happen until then. A lot has happened since. We have the Republican debate on August 23rd. We have other things that will happen, and I'm going to make a prediction to you right now. Chris Christie will be the so-called turd in the swimming pool. Big damn turd, but nonetheless. The only way he can draw attention to himself is to be ultra loud and obnoxious, and to attack Trump and to attack DeSantis the way he attacked Rubio a few years back. He has very little in terms of a conservative or successful record in New Jersey. New Jersey is run by the same crooked, pathetic party it's always been run by. Christie didn't fix that. And there'll be others who will try the same. Should Mike Pence finally get a few shekels and a few supporters, this is a man who's running and nobody knows why. And get on that debate stage, you'll hear him talk about how fantastic he is, how righteous he is, how he stood up to Trump. Well, he didn't stand up to anybody. What he should be saying is, look, I did what I thought was right. I got all kinds of advice. I did what I thought was constitutional. If you agree with me, vote for me. If you don't vote for me. That's not what he does. He is a much darker soul than I ever imagined. But it is what it is. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let's go to Pat. Neptune, New Jersey, XM Satellite. Pat, how are you?
Good, Mark. Yeah, I'm calling from the state of the Cape Majorca, a.k.a. Augustus
State of confusion.
Group. Anyway,
yes.
Yeah, I pre-ordered your book. I got one for myself and my daughter.
Thank you, Paul.
I'm
sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I'm really interested in the
I think you're going to love this
of
book.
the party.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, and I'm hoping my daughter really reads it. She was in college. She never really went that whole woke way, but I've been kind of drilling her with
Here's the
everything
thing,
that's going
Pat.
on,
If she's willing to read the book, if people like her who've gone through this college system, if they're willing to read the book, I bet it changed the minds of at least 70 or 80% of them. That's how powerful this thing is.
Yeah, no doubt. But, I'm kind of with you on the whole, what are we waiting for thing. I mean, do we need a picture of this guy with a bag of money in his hand?
Exactly.
I don't understand it. And
I like you, Pat. Get Pat's number. I have to cut him off, unfortunately. It's the end of the show, and I want him back tomorrow, Mr. Producer. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel, the freedom fighters in Ukraine and Taiwan, and you, the great people of America, the great Levinites, patriots listening to this program. I cannot thank you enough. And he's right. What do we need? The guy with handfuls of cash? See you tomorrow.